We all face difficult choices in our lives. The measure of a man isn't how many times he falls, but how he stands up afterward.
I thought I was going to have lunch with my son. That's what the text said. Nothing dramatic, just, "Can we meet today? I need to talk." So I drove across town, parked in front of the small cafe he chose, and waited. I remember checking my watch, wondering why my hands were shaking. I told myself it was nothing. Sons get busy. Sons get distant. That's life. Then he arrived. He didn't hug me, didn't ask how I was doing. He sat down, placed a manila envelope on the table between us, and slid it toward me with 2 fingers, like it was something dirty he didn't want to touch for too long. "Read this first," he said. The envelope was heavier than it should have been. Not because of what was inside, but because of what it meant. My name was written on the front in his handwriting. Careful, straight, deliberate. I didn't open it right away. I looked up at him, waiting for a smile, a joke, some sign that this was all a misunderstanding. There was nothing. Inside the cafe, people were laughing. Cups clinked. A waitress called out an order. Life kept moving, completely unaware that mine had just stopped. I finally opened the envelope. On the first page, in black ink, were the words that knocked the air out of my chest. "Dad, I'm not your son." For a moment, I genuinely thought I was going to pass out. Not because I believed it, but because I realized how much thought had gone into writing it. This wasn't anger. This wasn't emotion. This was planned. I read it again, slower this time. My eyes traced every word like they might rearrange themselves into something else if I stared long enough. They didn't. I looked up. What is this? He didn't meet my eyes. He stared past me, at the window, at the street outside, anywhere but my face. "It's just something that needs to be settled," he said. Settled. That word hurt more than the sentence on the page. I spent my whole life believing that being a father meant one thing above all else. You show up. You work. You sacrifice. You don't keep score, because love isn't a transaction. And now, sitting across from the boy I raised, I realized I might have been wrong. Because this felt like a transaction being closed. I asked him the question every father would ask. The one that comes from somewhere deeper than pride or fear. Why? He sighed, like I was the one making this difficult. "This isn't about feelings," he said. "It's just practical." Practical. I wanted to laugh. Instead, my throat tightened. I had missed birthdays to work overtime. I'd emptied my savings when he needed help starting out. I'd told myself that exhaustion was temporary, that it would all be worth it. And now I was holding a piece of paper that told me my role in his life was finished. That envelope wasn't just denying blood. It was denying everything that came with it. People talk about a revenge story like it starts with anger, with shouting, with fists on tables. But the truth is, it starts much quieter than that. It starts with a man realizing that the person he gave everything to has already decided he no longer matters. And in that moment, sitting in that cafe, with my son refusing to look at me, I understood something that would change the rest of my life. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an erasure. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam my hand on the table. I just sat there, holding that envelope, waiting for him to say something, anything, that would turn this into a bad joke. He didn't. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms, the same way he used to when he was a teenager and thought he already knew everything. "This isn't as dramatic as you're making it," he said. "It's just paperwork." Paperwork. I stared at him, trying to reconcile the man in front of me with the boy who once fell asleep on my chest while I worked night shifts and came home exhausted. I used to count my hours in aches and pains, telling myself it was temporary, that someday it would all make sense. "Do you remember," I asked quietly, "why I worked so much?" He shrugged. "Because you wanted to." That was it. That single sentence. Not because I had to. Not because I was trying to give you a better life. Because I wanted to. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not anger yet, just a dull pressure, like something heavy settling where it didn't belong. I reminded him of the things I'd never reminded him of before. The nights I skipped dinners. The vacations we never took. The savings account I drained when he needed help starting out. The mistakes he made that I quietly fixed so they wouldn't follow him for the rest of his life. He listened, patiently, politely. And then he said the words that told me everything. "That's what parents do," he said. "You don't get credit for that. It's the job." The job. I wonder, and I want you listening to this to be honest with yourself for a second. When did love start being measured like a contract? When did sacrifice stop meaning something and start being dismissed as obligation? Because I could see it in his face. He wasn't angry. He wasn't cruel. He was calm. That scared me more than anything else. "You chose to do those things," he continued. "I never asked you to." And there it was. Every mile I drove, every check I wrote, every dream I postponed, rewritten as a personal choice I had no right to expect gratitude for. I tried to speak, but my voice came out weaker than I wanted it to. "So none of it mattered?" He hesitated, just for a second. "It mattered," he said. "Back then." Back then. As if fatherhood had an expiration date. As if once he no longer needed me, everything before could be neatly filed away and forgotten. That's when I started to understand something I hadn't wanted to see. This wasn't about whether I was his father. This was about whether I was still useful. And I wasn't. If you've ever given everything to someone, your time, your strength, your youth, you probably know this feeling. That slow realization that the debt you thought was moral was never acknowledged as such by the other side. I looked down at the envelope again. The words hadn't changed. "Dad, I'm not your son." It wasn't just denying blood. It was denying the cost of love. And sitting there, across from my own child, I felt something crack. Not loudly, not all at once, but enough to know that whatever came next, things would never go back to the way they were. I went home that afternoon with the envelope still unopened in my jacket pocket. Not because I didn't want to read it, but because I already knew what it was doing to me, and I wasn't ready to let it finish the job. That night, I laid it on the kitchen table and finally went through every page. Slowly. Carefully. Like I was handling something fragile. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a letter. It was a process. There were forms, statements, language that didn't sound like my son at all. Too clean, too precise. Legal words, clauses, references to timelines and responsibilities, or rather, the removal of them. This hadn't been written in a moment of anger. This had been drafted, revised, prepared. And suddenly, the lunch made sense. The calm, the lack of emotion, the way he never raised his voice. He wasn't breaking something. He was closing something. The next day, I asked him one question. Not about the letter, not about blood, just one thing. How long have you been planning this? He didn't answer right away. He rubbed his forehead like a man tired of explaining himself. A while, he said finally. It didn't happen overnight. That was the moment my stomach dropped. Because you don't plan something like this unless you're trying to make room for something else. For what? I asked. He hesitated, not out of guilt, but calculation. There are things I'm working on, he said. Things that get complicated when people from the past are still involved. People from the past. That's what I was now. I looked at him and asked the question that had been clawing its way up my chest since the cafe. So this makes your life easier? He nodded, just once. Yes. That one nod hurt more than any argument could have. I asked him if he believed what he'd written, if he really thought I wasn't his father. He shook his head. No, he said. I know you're my father. The words landed hard, confusing, cruel in their clarity. Then why? I asked. He exhaled, slow and controlled. Because I don't want to owe you anymore. There it was. Not doubt, not confusion, not pain. Debt. All those years I thought I was giving freely. I'd been building something he wanted erased. You don't owe me, I said quietly. He looked at me then, really looked at me. That's not how it feels from my side, he said. Every decision I make, you're there. Every success, there's this unspoken expectation. I need that gone. Gone. Not repaid. Not acknowledged. Erased. I realized then that the envelope wasn't denying who I was to him biologically. It was denying what I represented. History. Sacrifice. Accountability. He wasn't trying to prove I wasn't his father. He was trying to remove me as a factor in his future. That night, sitting alone in my house, I thought about all the times I told myself, he'll understand one day. All the times I believed gratitude would come with age. I understood something else instead. For some people, gratitude isn't something they grow into. It's something they run from. And the more you give, the faster they want to leave it behind. By the time I turned off the lights and went to bed, one thing was clear. This wasn't an emotional rupture that could be talked through. It was a calculated decision. And I was the last loose end he needed to cut. I didn't confront him again after that conversation. Not because I was afraid, but because there was nothing left to argue. Once you realize someone has already decided who you are to them, words stop having power. So I went quiet. Not the kind of quiet that sulks or waits for an apology. The kind that listens. The kind that notices things you were too busy loving to notice before. I took the envelope back out and read it again, this time without shaking hands. I read it the way you read a manual, slowly, looking for what it does, not how it feels. Dates, clauses, phrases about responsibility ending, obligations dissolved, acknowledgments waived. That's when it fully sank in. This wasn't about cutting emotional ties. This was about cleaning up loose ends, and I was one of them. I started going through my own records, old folders I hadn't opened in years, bank statements, receipts, notes I'd scribbled to myself and forgotten about. Not because I was planning revenge, not because I wanted to hurt him, but because I needed to understand how much of my life had been quietly repackaged as something disposable. There's a strange clarity that comes when you stop asking to be appreciated. You start seeing patterns. How often he'd say, "I'll handle it," when money was involved. How rarely my name appeared anywhere official anymore. How every contribution I made slowly stopped being documented. I remembered a conversation from years back, one I'd brushed off at the time. He'd said, "You don't need to worry about this stuff anymore. I've got it." I'd thought that meant I was being relieved. Now I understood. It meant I was being removed.
I know this is hard, Arthur, but you have to let go. It's the only way forward now.
I talked to someone about it. Not a lawyer, at least not at first. Just an old friend who'd known me long enough to speak honestly. He listened, didn't interrupt, didn't offer comfort. Then he said, "You know what this really is, right?" I waited. "You're not being rejected because you did something wrong," he said. "You're being rejected because you're no longer useful." That sentence didn't hurt the way the envelope had. It settled. Because once you accept that, you stop scrambling to prove your worth. You stop listing sacrifices. You stop reminding people of what they owe. You start protecting what's left of yourself. I didn't call my son. I didn't send messages. I didn't demand explanations. I began quietly pulling back, financially, emotionally, practically. Not out of spite, out of self-respect. For the first time in my life, I asked myself a question I'd never allowed before. What do I deserve at this stage of my life? Not gratitude, not repayment, just not to be erased. There's a difference between giving everything to your child and allowing yourself to be written out of your own story. I hadn't crossed that line yet, but I could see it clearly now. And whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to beg for a place I had already earned. He chose the place. A small family gathering. Neutral ground, he said. Easier this way. Fewer misunderstandings. That should have been my warning. There were a few people there. Extended relatives, a couple of family friends, and his kids moving in and out of the room like they always did. Laughter in the background. Someone refilling drinks. Normal life doing its best impression of peace. He stood when I arrived. Polite. Formal. Like I was a guest, not his father. "I just want to be clear," he said once everyone settled. "There's been a lot of confusion. I don't want this turning into something emotional." Emotional. That word again. Always used like a flaw. "I built my life on my own," he continued, voice steady, confident. "Every decision, every success. I don't want anyone thinking I owe that to someone else." I noticed how carefully he avoided looking at me when he said it. "This isn't about disrespect," he added. "It's just the truth." The truth. I watched him as he spoke. The posture, the tone, the way he framed himself as reasonable, mature, done with the past. I recognized it. I'd taught him how to speak like that, how to sound certain even when the ground underneath wasn't solid. He went on, explaining why the paperwork made sense, why it was cleaner this way, why everyone would be better off once things were properly defined. Then came the line I knew he'd rehearsed. "I didn't get where I am because of handouts. I earned it."
Uncle Michael, why did you take all the money out of the puzzle box?
That was when it happened. His youngest, no more than 7, looked up from the floor, holding a half-finished puzzle, and said in the simplest, most honest voice imaginable, "Didn't Grandpa pay for your first office, Dad?" The room went quiet. Not the dramatic kind, just still. He froze. Not for long, just a beat too long. long enough for everyone to notice. "No," he said quickly. "That's not—" The child frowned, confused. "You said it was Grandpa's money. You said he helped you so you could start." No one laughed. No one reacted at all. But I could feel it, like a ripple moving through the room. That strange mix of discomfort and recognition. The kind that makes people suddenly very interested in their glasses or the floor. He cleared his throat, adjusted his stance, tried to recover. "That's not relevant," he said. "We're talking about something else." I didn't smile. I didn't look at him. I waited until the room settled again, then spoke for the first time. "You don't have to acknowledge what I gave you," I said, my voice calm. "You don't have to thank me. You don't even have to like me." He finally met my eyes. "But don't say it didn't happen." That was it. No accusations, no list of sacrifices, no raised voice. Just a line drawn quietly in the sand.
We all face difficult choices in our lives. The measure of a man isn't how many times he falls, but how he stands up afterward.
For a moment, I saw something flicker across his face. Not guilt, not regret, fear. Because for the first time, he wasn't controlling the story. He didn't respond, just nodded once, like a man accepting a minor inconvenience. The conversation moved on. Someone changed the subject. The kids went back to playing. But something had shifted. Not in him, in me. I realized then that this wasn't about winning, or exposing him, or getting validation from a room full of people who would go home and forget this ever happened. It was about knowing, in my own bones, that my life hadn't been a lie. That even if my son chose to erase me from his future, he couldn't rewrite the past. And that was enough. I didn't see my son much after that gathering. There were no dramatic fallouts, no angry messages, no final confrontation. Just distance, clean, intentional, and permanent. And strangely enough, once I stopped fighting it, the silence didn't hurt the way I thought it would. I took a long walk the morning after, no destination. Just the sound of my own footsteps, and the kind of thinking you only do when no one is expecting anything from you anymore. I passed houses where fathers were mowing lawns, kids chasing each other in driveways. Ordinary scenes I used to believe were proof that I'd done something right. For the first time, I let myself ask a hard question without flinching. If my son never acknowledges what I gave him, does that make it worthless? The answer came slower than I wanted, but it came. No, because sacrifice doesn't lose its meaning just because someone refuses to recognize it. Love doesn't become a mistake just because it wasn't repaid. I started doing something I hadn't done in decades. I began choosing myself. I reorganized my finances, simplified my life, let go of responsibilities that were never really mine anymore. I stopped checking my phone for messages that weren't coming. Stopped replaying conversations, trying to find the moment I could have said something differently. Some nights were still hard. I won't pretend they weren't. There's a specific kind of loneliness that comes from realizing your child doesn't see you as part of their future. But there was also relief. Relief in knowing I didn't have to keep proving my worth. Relief in not having to beg for a place at a table I helped build. One afternoon, I packed away old photographs. Not to erase the past, but to put it where it belonged. I kept the ones that mattered, the ones where I remembered who I was, not just what I provided. I realized something then that I wish I'd understood sooner. Being a father doesn't mean allowing yourself to be erased. It means giving what you can, while still holding on to your dignity. I didn't stop loving my son. I don't think a father ever really can. But I stopped chasing a version of him that only existed when he needed me. And that was the moment I finally felt free. Not victorious, not vindicated, just whole. Now, if you've been listening to this story and something in it felt uncomfortably familiar, if you've ever been made to feel like your sacrifices were just expected, like your love was something owed and easily discarded, then I want to ask you something. Have you been giving out of love or out of fear of being forgotten? And more importantly, what part of yourself have you been shrinking to keep someone else comfortable? Sometimes the hardest thing a parent can do isn't letting go of a child. It's holding on to their own worth when the child no longer does. And if this story made you stop for a moment, if it stirred something you've been carrying quietly for years, then maybe it was worth telling. Because none of us deserve to be erased.